Asmodeus, 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 Asmodeus. Oh, 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 Asmodeus. Ooh, rock me, Asmodeus. Hey, everyone. Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer, voyage, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another Roll20 review, my written and video review series. We take a look at the marketplace section of online role-playing website, Roll20.net. For this video, I'll be reviewing the 5e campaign module, Chains of Asmodeus, designed by Arcanum Worlds and published by Wizards of the Coast, which is also available on the DM's Guild. A review copy has been provided. And if you enjoy these videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Of course, there will be lots of spoilers as I dive into this complete adventure, as well as giving my thoughts on what works and what doesn't, and how it looks on Roll20. Also, content warning at the very start of this review. Should be pretty obvious, but if you're not a fan of demons, of devils, of hell, first of all, warning for this review, because I'll be going through all those things. And second, probably don't look at the book that has, a devil on the cover and says Asmodeus on there, because that's what we're getting into. On the other hand, it also doesn't really go very far into what I thought it would do in terms of like what hell torture is, and we're going to like save damned souls and everything. It's still kind of a PG-13 version of hell in many ways, like a very, I don't know, D&D friendly way. Like nothing really goes, you'd think if anything would be going overboard into the nastiness and need a lot of content warnings would be this one. And there is still some content warnings here for sure, like a small paragraph, but honestly, I didn't think, nothing that I was like, oh geez, they're going there. Like, no, in fact, I thought I was like, oh, this is actually kind of not very intense, to where I thought it'd be a little more intense than this. Anyway, this is a tier 3 to 4 campaign adventure. It's a massive book. It is by Arcanum Worlds, which are the designers behind Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, which is a campaign that I have not reviewed for whatever reason. I'm not sure why I haven't gotten around to it. That one, I believe, takes place in their own world. This one, however, takes place in the realms, and specifically, obviously, in the Nine Hells. So it uses all the D&D IP. I don't know where the line is drawn between like which like devils are in like public domain and which are actually under like D&D. Like I think Zariel, for example, is a D&D character, but this is available only on the DM's Guild and only on VTTs that are licensed or have a licensing agreement with D&D and Wizards of the Coast, and that's why you can see this on Roll20, which is where I'm going to be reviewing this product. I have pretty mixed feelings about it overall. Honestly, this is not going to be a glowing review, nor is it going to be a damning one. It's just similar to a lot of recent releases where I think it does some things really well and other things I was pretty disappointed in for the most part. We're going to get into all of that in my review right now. The first thing we're going to talk about, though, is what all do you get with the Chains of Asmodeus bundle available on Roll20. Current price listed at $29.99. You get a level 11 through 20 campaign adventure. Again, high level tier 3 to 4 campaign adventure organized into 12 chapters as well as an introduction. It includes 24 full color maps. Now, you might think, that's awesome. 24 maps is a huge amount. And we get color. This isn't like some bullshit like black and white or sketch graph paper thing. Like, no, we get full color maps. However, let me kind of drop the other shoe, and that is we only get 3 that are actual traditional 5-foot square battle maps. 3 of the 24. 2 of them are kind of extra large, stretched out to be 5-foot square battle maps. In other words, you'll have like the tiny token problem because they were, designed to be bigger, but Roll20 kind of tried to fix it to make it so the token thing works. The other 19, I'm putting my head in my hands, are basically regional maps that have no real grid on them, even though we're going to go over this. We're going to go over that. But obviously, it's going to be one of my big cons. Is as much as I love a lot of the regional maps that are used in this campaign, damn, they really dropped the ball in giving us just normal 5-foot grid square battle maps to work with, because that is how we play D&D for the most part, and it just makes the DM's job that much harder. And especially on the VTT, it's very lacking when it comes to actual usable grid maps we can sit there and battle on. The adventure also includes 175 magic items. Unfortunately, only a couple of them have pictures, because this is technically a third party publishing through the DM's Guild, but that means they don't have access to all of the, for example, all the pictures from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So you get very few of those, only the couple that are, I believe, originally, and then a lot of them don't have their own pictures. Over 100 NPC and monster tokens, most of which do have art, which I was very pleasantly impressed by, because a lot of times when I review products that are, a Cobalt Press or anything on the DM's Guild that came through, they don't have a lot of creature art because, again, you don't have access to. I don't know why the way the licensing works. You don't get instant access to all like the monster manual art, for example. But I don't know if Roll20 did this or if Arcanum Worlds did this, but they actually put together like even what you do is you did not get the art from the monster manual. Instead, they came up with other art. So I don't know if this is like public domain art or royalty free or whatever happened here, but we actually do get artwork for most, not all of them, but for most of these creatures that aren't even necessarily new to this, like, Kobold or whatever. Like, we get artwork. Again, this is not from the 5e Monster Manual, but it's here as token art. That's usually a big complaint I have for these things that aren't directly developed by Wizards of the Coast. So big thumbs up for giving us proper creature art. Over 30 player art handouts. That's actually kind of on the low side when it comes to these big campaign adventures. Art is, I want to say it's not its strong suit. It's a different art style than I think a lot of us are used to. If you're used to a lot of 5e, stuff, and this one is more of like almost looks like a cinematic cutscene type thing going on, maybe a little bit more realistic than people are used to. Some of it even looks like 3D models instead of like that kind of fantasy painter art. So a different kind of art style, and you're not going to get as much art either. 100 lost souls and 9 souls of the damned. I will go into what that means, but essentially it is your main quest for going into the 9 hells, and then over 25 rollable tables and macros. That's about average, I think, for a campaign of this size, which is like anytime you see like a random encounter table or just a table that does something, Roll20 has pumped that into their rollable tables, and then you can roll that by clicking on these buttons, and it looks like a nice little thing like that. That's an instant macro for you. The art pack for Chains of Asmodeus, which is also included in this bundle, includes the 40 art handouts, as well as over 100 monster NPC tokens. Basically, all of the tokens you saw with art on them are available in the art pack, which is right here. So you actually get double dipping because they've got like the, DM version, which has this kind of normal red and yellow shading, and then the blue shading on the outside. But that's probably on the low side, actually, in terms of character art. But again, it's just there's not a whole lot of art in this book compared to a Wizards of the Coast release. One advantage Wizards has is, they work with some of the best artists in the business with all the Magic the Gathering stuff, so you get some incredible artwork. And I'm not saying the art is bad here. I think it's fine. It's just a different style, and I don't think you get quite as much of it. You also get the Chains of Asmodeus Compendium, which includes the new monsters, which, again, a compendium can be added to any game. The new ones come out to 50. I said over 50 new monster stat blocks, which means any of these which aren't included, like Giant Spider and Frost Giant, like all those is just normal stuff you get in the monster manual. This one does include all of these, though. Everything you need to run this module, whether you have the monster manual or not, is included in this adventure. But for the compendium specifically, I guess they're listed right here, actually, are all the new monsters, which of course are a lot of fiends. And then you also get the specific 11 archdevils that, including the 9, I guess, that rule each of the different layers of hell. Full stat blocks for all these creatures, which is pretty impressive. So if you ever wanted your actual, like, CR30... Now, the players aren't designed to fight Asmodeus. I don't think anybody's designed to fight Asmodeus. What are you, crazy? But the stat block is there if you want to... I don't know, for some reason, if you want to play around with it. But I'm sad to say that Asmodeus is not really meant to be... I guess if there was any chance to fight him, it'd be this epic level 20... campaign where you get to the bottom of hell and then face off, but we'll get into the story thing, but that's not really devils. They want to deal with you, right? They're small. Picture Raphael from Baldur's Gate 3, for those of you that play that game. Like, they're such fun characters to deal with socially, with also the menacing power they have behind them. So of course you've got these powerful stat blocks, but a lot of the devils, maybe you're not really necessarily fighting with any of them. You're more like meeting with them as like lords of their domain. Also, the compendium includes over 20 infernal magic items, which are the specific new magic stuff, which is included in this campaign, and a corruption table, which is the system that is only used in this module, but allows you to track the player's corruption as they go down into the layers of hell. All right, so where do I start with this campaign? In the beginning, there were the 9 hells. Asmodeus, fallen angel. It's all very biblical, by the way. It's very much inspired by the Christian Bible, where it's got the fallen angel and he's created this hell. And I mean, this campaign is literally Dante's Inferno. It's and that's where D&D's like 9 circles of hell idea fucking came from, is Dante's Inferno's going through the different layers of hell. And that's what this. If you were disappointed in Descent into Avernus, which was the like hell themed campaign that Wizards put out a couple years ago, and you thought, oh man, there's all these layers of hell and we're only going to go to Avernus for, the second and third acts basically, and I wanted more. Well, if you want more hell, then Chains of Asmodeus absolutely has that, because this has all 9 layers of hell and you go through all 9 layers. In fact, there's an absolutely fabulous flow chart adventure thing. These are individual maps that I'll show you as well, at least some of them. But you go along the river Styx and you end up going through all these different layers, and it's really cool to see them all kind of mapped out like this, because obviously it's hard to have an actual like official map of the region. They're always shifting and everything. It's kind of like their own little demi-planes in a way. The adventure, you can either play with existing characters, because again, you're starting at level 11, so that would probably help. In fact, you could make this as a pretty nice sequel to literally anything, although weirdly I think it works worse as a sequel to Descent into Avernus, because you're just there. Like, I don't know, it just feels like, why are we going back there? We're just regurgitating some of the content there, because Avernus is one of the layers here. But I think for a different campaign, especially because the motivation for going down is to save souls. Your whole goal is to save either an important person in your character's life or your own soul, which means your character has essentially died and then been brought back by your group patron. So the players at the beginning of the game, they should choose a new character or choose an existing one, choose a soul to be saved, and choose a group patron. So the story isn't really told organically through. The way it starts doesn't create incentive in the story. You need to do that during character creation, which is a choice. You can do that, which is why I think this actually works best as a sequel to another campaign in which characters have already made those meaningful connections and had NPCs that died on them, which would be fabulous to do. Is like, oh, you have a chance to like now rescue these people. There was a fucking Robin Williams movie years ago where he had to basically go to hell to like rescue his spouse or something, or maybe he was dead. I forget how that works, but I watched it in film class for some reason. Somebody will be able to reference this movie I'm thinking of. But that's the goal here, is to go to hell so that you can rescue either these important NPCs whose souls have been damned. They've been either for some. The idea is a lot of them, and then we actually get artwork for them, which is kind of nice. Have like kind of traded in something for. They traded their soul in for. It wasn't like they were like bad people themselves, but they obviously made a bad deal to get ahead or do something, and then that person was important to you, and now they've been killed, and their soul is now languishing in hell. I forget how your character knows this, but they somehow learn about this or know this or something, and that's how all the characters come together. Or it could be the character themselves. So you've got 10 of these lost souls, which are designed to all be NPCs that your character cares about, and have different themes, of course: pride, greed, murder, anger, all this stuff. Or it could be your own self. So I love that there's an option here, and you can combine them pretty easily. Is maybe some of the characters were dead and have been resurrected, and now their soul is trapped in hell, but because there's some like bullshit reason why they can still exist in the material plane and go save their soul. It's whatever DM magic thing. And you've got multiple options there as well. So that's pretty cool. So character creation is pretty exciting here, I think, because it adds that extra incentive. Or again, the better way I think to do it would be as a proper sequel. You're like, okay, I've got this now, and so many of the 5e campaigns end at level like 10 or 11 or 12, right? So it's a perfect starting point to then, like, so many people are like, well, where do we go from here? Well, assuming your players are okay with hell, then you can go to the 9 layers of hell in order to save NPCs that are important to you. Or maybe your character died once and was resurrected, but you can kind of retcon and say, oh, but you felt kind of weird ever since then, and like your soul's pulled, and for whatever reason your soul's being tortured in hell, and you got to go save your soul. So that's a pretty strong motivation, right? That's a very, very strong personal motivation. And on top of that, you also choose a group patron, which is somebody who just gives you kind of a main quest on top of everybody's personal quest. There are 3 group patrons available, and I'm trying to find where the adventure, that might be one of them. And the patrons are either good, neutral, or evil. The good ones are the Hell Riders of Elturel. They want you to save a bunch of trapped celestials. The neutral ones are the Conclave of Harua, which are like a bunch of mages who, I don't know, the neutral one almost sounds pretty evil. It's like you need to hunt down this one person in hell who is this unique soul that can be used to like unleash devastation, but the person doesn't know that they're that thing. It's like they're just kind of this, they're not really an innocent bystander, they're kind of a jackass, but they're not really, they're like this weird like antichrist character, but they have no will of doing that on their own, so it becomes a very weird moral thing. But the neutral guys are just like, yeah, you need to kill that person and make sure we trap their soul and destroy it, like as if that's like a neutral thing to do, which is weird. But the other thing you can do is hunt down a bunch of magic items for them in addition to that. And then the evil guys is weird because it's supposedly the evil team is also behind all these murders, but you can work with them anyway if you just need to like sign on with them to go to hell. By the way, the leader of the evil guy, the Deathstalkers of Baal, is literally Saravok, who is the fucking boss of the original Baldur's Gate. Speaking of Baldur's Gate, it's the boss of Baldur's Gate 1, the end boss, and he is the contact here, which is kind of a cool thing. The group patrons all have different special perks they can give you, magic items. Like the evil guys, you can use soul coins as a currency now. It's kind of interesting. Like you just picture the start of a video game. It's like, all right, which patron do you want to work with at the beginning? And it shows you all the different perks. It's almost like which like skill tree specialization, do you want? Because they don't really, it does play into the story because it adds to your main quest a bit, but also you're going to hell for your own personal quest. So you've got those 2 things, and that's basically the whole story, which is kind of a bummer, I think. You get the entire story at the very beginning of the game, which is every character has a reason to go down to hell because you're either saving a loved one or saving yourself, and we're all working for a group patron who is wanting something from hell. The bad guys, by the way, want just like an artifact or something. So that's kind of it. There's no real twists or turns. There's no like making progress on it other than you can save your soul. The souls, by the way, are all scattered around. I was trying to find where that is listed. But each soul is in a different area. Wish I could remember where they're located. Okay, maybe this kind of tells you souls and then saving souls. Lost souls. Nope, that doesn't tell you. All right, well, there's a chart somewhere that tells you where all the souls are located, but I forget what heading that's under. But everything is separated according to different layers. So it may be that some of them are going to, oh, well, this kind of tells you too, which layers they're on and which of the, okay, yeah, there was a chart somewhere I missed, but this one, which in terms of there's souls on every single layer, and there's also some of the patron objectives on every layer. So it really is up to the players and the DM to try to work out which layers are more important than others. But in any case, you're supposed to make it all the way to the bottom because you have to still make a deal with Asmodeus. Even though you can save those souls, it's still in their contract that they'll be damned. So not only do you have to like physically save them for whatever torment they're under, but then you have to talk to Asmodeus at the end to actually free the soul and work out a new contract or null the contract or something. So that's the reason to going all the way to the bottom. That's the whole story. I was disappointed in that. I still kind of like that introduction, I guess, but I don't know. I wish there were more like steps involved or something. What it ends up feeling like is like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is a humongous 20-level dungeon crawl where each layer is its own dungeon, and there's not really an overarching story there. It's like each dungeon has its own kind of story going on and just feels like you can, play them almost a la carte if you wanted to, and it's just kind of a massive dungeon. This is kind of a non-dungeon version of that. Dungeons of the Mad Mage, obviously nothing but dungeons. This one has almost no dungeons whatsoever, which is also a big bummer. But it feels like you're just going through the layers without necessarily having a I don't know, just story progress things being made. There's no like twists and turns. The main NPCs kind of come and go. The one you end up signing on in the early game with this character called Kotam, who has a infernal barge that you use to navigate the River Styx. First, you have to go meet with him in the cathedral. He gets possessed by a demon. You have to fight the demon, get some information about. That's right. That's how you know where everything is. You talk to him. He gets possessed by Beelzebub, and you talk to Beelzebub, and the Beelzebub reveals where everything is. So automatically, very beginning, you know where everything is. You're like, okay, you need to go to this layer. You need to go to that layer. Like you know all the information at the very beginning, which seems kind of weird. And then you team up with Kotam, who has his own reasons for going, and you just go on his riverboat, which is provided as a map right here, Kotam's Barge, which is one of our few 5-foot battle maps. And weirdly, it kind of combines a nautical adventure with hell, because you're going along the River Styx for pretty much this entire adventure up until you get to the very final layer where the Styx doesn't actually flow, which I didn't realize that. It stops here. You have to climb down, and then you can go along the river. Leith, I believe, is at the very end. But you're going along the river through each thing, and it really feels like an amusement park ride, right? Like it's kind of linear. There's not, even though you've got these regions, because you're lacking dungeons, you're lacking like you're just always going to the next layer. It just feels a little too linear. But I don't know how you would make a big 9 layers of hell thing without doing that either way. So I don't know what the best solution to that is. And in terms of going over each individual chapter, I probably just highlight a few and like give you examples and showing, because it's a lot of content here. I like Kotam is fine. He's with you the whole time and he knows everything. He's just the all important NPC that knows everything. And then Tax, oh, there's no picture of Tax. Where are you, TX? Sorry, TX, not Tax. There he is. This character is a glorious gnome cleric of Cyric, who's the god of lies, and he pretends to be a kind of pirate sorcerer. And he's just a complete eccentric, boisterous jackass. And the whole time he's plotting against the players and Kotam. If a PC wanted to play this character, I would probably roll my eyes and be like, this is going to take a very specific player who knows how to rein it in, because this character is going to be out of control every single session. But the DM obviously would know to hopefully rein it in and use it as a very fun, insane character. So I think TX has the potential to at least be very, very delightful, and of course betrays them near the very end, causes this big fight and battle and stuff, and that's fun. That's great. But after that, it's just each individual place in of itself. So chapter 1 is that introduction where you get Kotam, and then you go through the portal to get to Avernus. Chapter 2 actually is just kind of the background information for the 9 hells. It talks about I don't know, everything you would need in terms of the major sins and how the hells work, how the layers work. The fact that we're going to do this corruption system where Asmodeus has grand designs on the players themselves and is going to be trying to corrupt them through all these different corruption events, which are listed here. And the players, you're supposed to run at least one of these per layer. And if your players agree to these things, which is usually offering them some kind of infernal magic item, and they end up using it and equipping it or whatever, they gain corruption points. And that matters by the end of the game. If they have too much corruption, which is in that table somewhere, then they have to end up basically doing some extra steps to redeem themselves. They have to make actually, I think if they become corrupted, then they don't get to just do the instant annulment. Instead, the best they can hope for is like sign on with Asmodeus and become a pit fiend when they die, which is actually pretty dark. I will say that. So that's a pretty big deal. If they're a little too corrupted, then like the best you can, because you can't really trick, like other devils you could probably trick, but Asmodeus, you're in deep. You're in deep when you've gotten that deep in the game. Every layer is a chapter, pretty obvious, and each area has its own map and basically one adventure location. So we're going to jump to Dees. That's the second layer of hell, which is the one that has a giant city. It's a bunch of mountains. Again, the Styx flows through everything. This is like what one of the regional maps looks like. I'll show maybe a couple of these. I love these regional maps. These are fabulous. I'm glad we have this one that, showcases everything. But I'm also glad we have these individual ones. So that's awesome. The fact that we get all those maps. The bummer is that we don't really get any dungeon maps on top of that. So like the one adventure. So again, each of these layers has like one adventure location. So it's not like I mean, I don't know. It goes through a couple areas, like so it's a Dees overview. It'll like mention the city of Dees. Well, that's the only one it mentions. No, key locations. That's what I want. The Iron Tower, the Garden of Delights, the Great Prison. It'll mention a few sites, and then there might be like an encounter or something there. But basically, each of these layers is all about one single adventure location. So in order to get through this adventure of 9 different regions, it kind of distills them all into one adventure location. In this case, the adventure location is this Agora of Floating Knives, which is this floating marketplace, which of course is made fun because it's all about fucking demons and evil shit. There's like an arena there. There's a nasty theater where messed up stuff is happening. Almost picture like the theater from Interview with a Vampire or something. And a lot of these areas, as you can see, are not battle maps, and that's kind of where the problem comes from, I think, when it comes to showcasing it on a VTT like Roll20. You're not going to get these individual battle maps, even though a lot of these areas are full of fighting opportunities. So to jump ahead to one of my favorites, which is in Phlegethos, which is the 5th region, I believe. So this is, or no, sorry, the 4th hell, which is the one that looks the most like hell, I think, that a lot of us picture, which is like flaming, lakes of lava and fire and everything. The one adventure location here is the Elemental Preserve, which is this really cool like hunting ground that this one devil general has set up, where you can hunt all these fantastical exotic creatures, including this was an amazing scene where the players can either, depending on how they play their cards, they can either join the hunt, they can be involved in the hunt by having to like draw the monsters out, or they can be the hunted, which I love that that's actually broken up. And in one of the hunts is like hunting this giant fire kraken thing, like with airships and stuff. Like it's crazy cool stuff, but there's no battle map for that, right? Like it puts a lot of work on a DM running this game in Roll20. Yes, you get all these cool regional maps, which are great. I'm glad that we have these, but it's not like we don't ever zoom in further than we get the one regional map, and then it's like we get another regional map as we zoom into like the one area, and then we don't get to zoom in any further than that, which requires the DMs to have to go through and make all of these maps, which is kind of a major problem I have. But I think these individual adventure locations are still pretty fun. Like I said, Phlegethos has this Elemental Preserve. Malbolge has this inn that has been made out of the bones of a gigantic exploding hag. So it's like the region of decay. The layer that's all about the ruins, which I believe is Maladomini, has this is actually a weird map. I love the eye market. It's like this gang warfare. It's like if you had like Escape from New York or something in hell. That's how this region would be. So I love all the choices with the adventure location. Right? There's a lot of variety in here. It's just a bummer from a Roll20 perspective, because it's like, all right, I get to show you this map, and now as a DM, I'm gonna have to come up with all these little maps for all these various combat encounters and things that actually take place in and around here. The eye market itself is, by the way, is run by a Beholder and Lich Mind Flayer couple, which is called an Alhoon, I believe. It's called the eye market because they literally gouge your eyes out and replace it with like magical jewel eyes. It's very messed up, but in a cool fantasy way, dark fantasy, I guess, very grimdark for some stuff, even though I think some of it others a little bit PG-13. But I think I don't want to complain too much about how interesting these maps are, but they're not 5 foot square battle maps. In fact, some of them should have been. I'm not sure why they weren't. We go back up to Avernus. You go to like this ruined tower. This is not a battle map, and I don't know why. Like, in fact, this is the normal zoom level. Like, I don't know why Roll20 couldn't just turn this into a 5 foot square battle map on this side. Same thing with this one over here, the Demon Nest. Like, what happened here? Why isn't this not a blown up like 5 foot battle map? Why is it just a handout thing? So all of that is unfortunately a big disappointment that further makes this adventure kind of a bummer for Roll20. And each of the chapters is one of these areas. And then you get to chapter 11, which is a little bit different. It's called Hunted by the Dukes. And chapter 11, I think, should have been placed a lot earlier, just easier to organize, because their hunts could happen at any time. But there are 2 scripted events that can happen technically anywhere. So everything else, it's one layer. You arrive there. There's a couple sites you can check out, but there's one adventure location where all the important souls and magic items and basically things are located, and that's the one area the players need to check out. And it's like the representation of that layer. It's like your stop. It's like where the train stops on this tour through, your very linear tour through the Styx of the layers of hell. And then there are two scripted events which can happen. Both of them are, of course, boat related because you're on a fucking boat going down the river Styx, right? So one of them is just a giant warship, and the other is a giant submarine. And these, ironically, are the two closest things we get to dungeon crawls in this adventure, which is nuts. I'm pretty disappointed by that. A few of them get close. I think it's the Kanaya Sorrow Mine. Maybe that feels a little bit close, but this one also is a weird. In fact, I'll show you that map. This one. And a lot of them do this where it's like, here's a side view and then here's the dungeon view. But you can see what they had to do with this one is super teeny tiny tokens because the map is just enormously sized, I guess. But in terms of 5-foot battle maps, this one, the warship is a properly sized. Actually, it's also kind of small tokens now that I look at it. The warship, and then we've got the submarine here. These might be considered the extra large maps now that I think about it. Cool opportunities, though. Basically, the players can get attacked anywhere. It's supposed to be after they've done like a certain number of things. One of them attacks them trying to kill them, and the other one attacks them trying to capture them for Asmodeus and literally like bring them to the Archdevil. So those are both very cool scripted events. I guess I was hoping for more of those kind of things, and also TX kind of betrays them at some point, just to help really break up the story. But thankfully those are here. I don't know why they're in chapter 11, because again, they could be listed somewhere earlier so the DM knows ahead of time when to trigger those big fights. And then after Kanaya, they get to Nessus, where they finally meet with some like ancient immortal elf who is stocked in this library at literally the end of the Nine Hells before it drifts off into the void. And they can just get their contracts and annul them, and that's it. That's with the campaign, unless some of them are corrupted, in which case then you have to go before Asmodeus, and it's kind of a big bummer. Or if the players just get kept, there's numerous opportunities where they get captured by Asmodeus if they haven't got protection. But it looks like, from what I was reading, if they play all their cards right and they get the proper protections, they don't become corrupted, they do everything right, then it's very anticlimactic by the end. The one thing that could happen is like Asmodeus sends in this big war purge, because apparently the one agreement he's got with this immortal elf is like, no matter who is here researching, doing all the work, he gets to come in and just take everybody, and then that elf is the only one that's left, and he does that whenever he wants to, but not too often probably. But of course, when the players are trying to annul their contract, he sends everybody in as a big war thing. But that's basically the climax, unless the players are corrupted, or they get captured by Asmodeus, or they just haven't been properly protected by him and they get summoned by him. Then they have to go and actually sit before this triad group and perform these certain trials, and then eventually talk with Asmodeus, and that's basically it. I don't know, it feels kind of anticlimactic in the end. And the barge has, of course, the magic ability where it can plane shift, and when you cast plane shift in the Hells, you can only go up, you can't go down. Well, if you're trying to escape, then just a bunch of plane shifts with your ship will get you out of the Hells. So I don't know what I was expecting. I think the most interesting thing would be if you were stuck here and trying to get out. I think that would have been maybe a more interesting story angle, but then you had to do the reverse thing and start off in like the most difficult, lowest level and try to make your way up. Or if there was, I don't know, some way where you were stuck, but you could teleport, but it would be like randomly to each one, and you had to do something to get to the next one. Here, it really feels like you're on this barge, which is relatively safe, and you're just going down the river. There's no real markers or barriers or anything to go from one layer to the next. You've got the NPC that knows everything. And then it's all about just stopping at these different stations and points of interest, and depending on where you need to go, to save your various souls. And you already know where all those souls are ahead of time. So all of those things felt a little disappointing to me, a little too easy. And getting the souls out is 90% of the time just trying to fight whatever creature has them kept as and a lot of them are like Cinderella situation where it's like you're cleaning or something, or you're serving somebody, depending on what the sin was. So it didn't really seem that hardcore, but that's probably the D&D PG-13 they're going for, which is fine. Overall, I think it's a mixed thing for me. I think the Roll20 thing doesn't translate as well because of the lack of 5-foot square battle maps. However, for the idea of getting through all these 9 layers of hell and just having that as a backdrop And if you want to make your own campaign using, Hell as that's not just Avernus, then I can't think of another resource that would be more better served than this one, because it does go through every single layer. You've got stat blocks for the Archdevils, and you do have at least one very cool, well-detailed adventure location for each of these spots. Also, it comes with the usual stuff where you've got this full token page that shows you all your tokens you can use. You can copy paste, or you can just drag them off this battle map, and they work. Boom, everything has got the right armor class and hit points scripted up there. They also include nowadays the dynamic lighting example page if you are a Roll20 subscriber, which shows you how all the dynamic lighting works, all the door systems, how to use samples for night vision and wall line of sight breaking and windows and all that good stuff. I won't go over that here because I've talked about that in other videos, and a Roll20's tips page, which really helps you if you're a complete newbie to Roll20 on how to work all of these various things, move people along different maps, open stuff up, use the compendium, and all of that. The one generic battle map we get is this one on kind of a gray, looks like asphalt, which, you're going to be using a lot of battle maps. It's a bummer. There's just a lot of maps that are going to be necessary to run this campaign that are not included here, but at least we do have the nice regional maps. Let's go over my pros and cons for Chains of Asmodeus. Pro, it's a tier 3 to 4 adventure that runs through all 9 layers of Hell. That is a pro. We do not get very many high-level adventures that specifically take place after when a lot of campaigns would end. And I think this could make a pretty good sequel because it does have all that high-level content and supports it, especially if you can work in the storyline where, hey, you remember those NPCs that you cared about, or maybe yourself who got killed and was resurrected later. Turns out your souls are actually in Hell and you need to go rescue them. I think that's a pretty, compelling intro, at least from the beginning. Pro, excellent regional maps for each layer with varied adventure locations. That was probably a cool way of doing it, and probably the most concise and organized way of doing it, because I don't know how you would do all of this without just making it a source book. So I feel like this one kind of strode the line between source book and adventure, where it's like, all right, we're going to get through all 9 layers. We're going to give you a brief overview of each layer and then distill each one into like one major adventure spot. And all the adventure spots are pretty good. Like I said, there's a messed up inn. There's a floating marketplace. There's that elemental preserve. There's the sorrow mine where they literally extract the sweet frozen brain juices of the giant progenitors who helped to like build the Forgotten Realms back in the day. They're like frozen, and now they're like mining their brain juice to make this unique wine, which is actually pretty messed up. There's a whole gang warfare thing going on that iPlace Marketplace. There's a ton of different things. So even though, I picture people go to Hell, they're like, oh man, okay, we're going to be in this one, like, Lake of Fire city area. But no, you're going to be going to all kinds of different locations. There's actually a ton of variety, probably even more than you would get in any other 5e campaign you would get here. Pro, multiple options for important NPCs or PCs themselves as damned souls in need of saving. I do like that idea where it creates a personal tie and a personal motivation to going to Hell, because I think just having your boss tell you need to go to Hell because we need some artifacts, I'd be like, no, I'm good. But if you're like, hey, your sister that helped raise you, or your spouse, or your childhood friend, or whatever, business partner is gonna have a funny one, their soul is in Hell right now, then that's much more close motivation for the players to go. Or obviously if it's yourself too, that's a huge one for the players, or maybe a little more selfish. So I think that works pretty well, and I love that we have a lot of different options for that, and they're all placed in different areas, and then they're all tortured by different things that have to do with these different sins. And Pro, a corruption tracker that makes choices matter in the end. It's only a binary choice. It's either are they corrupted or aren't they. Let's see if the tracker's at the end, or no, maybe at the beginning. It's in the compendium, I know, but there's a table for, you're supposed to give these corruption, these temptations to them. Basically, at the end of every layer, you can obviously do more, and hopefully you're getting your players to accept all these infernal magic items, accepting some power levels, and then on the plus and on the back end, you are writing down, keeping track of their corruption, and if their corruption reaches a certain level, depending on how many you've done, then they're basically irredeemable, and they've essentially fallen into Asmodeus's trap. That's a tricky thing because your players don't necessarily know that's happening, but maybe it's a warning you give them at the very beginning, or maybe, that Kotam can give them is like, hey, be careful about accepting any bargains or things that look too good to be true because, chances are we're all going to be ensnared in Asmodeus. And that is pretty much what happens here, maybe. Cons, I think the story is a little too simplistic. You basically know everything at the very beginning, and then it just becomes a very on rails or on river, as it were, kind of tour through the Nine Hells and doesn't really make anything else of that. There's those 2 scenes where scripted encounters come and attack you, but otherwise you're just kind of, all right, now we're in this. It feels almost too episodic where it's like a story of the week kind of a thing, right? It doesn't have, there's an overall tie that we're in here going deeper and deeper, but I just didn't get a good enough story from this campaign adventure. Con, it lacks good dungeon crawls. Another major problem I have, and something I love seeing from campaigns that I do love, is good meaty dungeon crawls, because that's where D&D shined. It's where all the different systems and rules come into play and excel, is during the dungeon crawl. This has almost no dungeon crawls whatsoever, which is a big, big negative and kind of a red flag for me personally in terms of how I like to run D&D campaigns, and especially how well they translate into a virtual tabletop where we're staring at maps and grids and trying to engage the players that way. This basically, other than like the 2 ship things, there's real, and I guess you could consider those maybe dungeons, but not really. Everything else is just kind of an adventure location where you're going to need a ton of extra maps to really make this work, almost to where it just seems like too much work. Even if I loved this adventure, and that was the only problem I had with it, that's a big, big bridge to cross. And that kind of ties into the other con, which is that there are very few normal 5-foot square maps because, there are no dungeon crawls. So almost every map is just kind of a regional map that looks great and is nice to have, but we're not going to battle on those maps for the most part. And that's like over half of the layer maps are just those kind of, you got the big region and you've got your smaller region, and then that's it. It doesn't really get any smaller than that. So a little bit of an issue. Final verdict, Chains of Asmodeus is Dante's Inferno by way of D&D, a mostly linear tour through one of the most exotic and feared settings of the realms. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at rogue20.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/Rogue Watson. Shouts to Platinum patrons: Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, Brandon, Zenicider, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Corey, Big Nut, John F., John L., Scott, Eric, Tyler, Nathan, Kip Chrisley, Counselor Andrew, Daryl the Reldron, Captain Woody 79, Stephanie, Andy, Patrick, Jason, Ismail, Amit, Lumpy Spuds, and Koi, and Gold patrons: RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, The Lizard Lounge, Sam, Drome, Nathan, Fezzicator, Scott, Rippus, Karen, Jerry, Thomas, and Glenn. Thank you all very much for your support.